what struck me right away was how quiet and calm the mind of Wes Craven was, and also how creative and brilliant he could put into juxtaposition the different elements of human nature and emotional content and how we respond to various specific situations.
He hasn't spoken a word.
Hello, creeps. It's your old pal, the Crypt Keeper. And you are now tuned in to my good fiends at Talks from the Crypt, the most gruesome podcast in the world.
So today in the Crypt, we clearly have a very special guest. Just wrote his book, Michael Berryman, It's All Good, a Michael Berryman memoir in my own words, and I've been reading it for the last couple of months, and man, I am a big fan of it. Michael, thank you for coming into the Crypt today.
It's great to be here, Brandon, and I really appreciate your wisdom and good choice of reading material.
Yeah.
Hope you liked it.
Yeah, no, I loved it. I really did, and I read it once, and then I read it again, because I really wanted to take in all of the information that we were getting from the book for the studio. So before we get into the details of it, what exactly was your motivation for writing a memoir?
Well, I was influenced by Rod Serling and various science fiction writers. So I would write little vignettes just for my own entertainment. And then throughout my life, there would be things I was dealing with, which I mentioned in the book. And so I would write down how I felt about those various situations. And so they're more of references and notes to myself. And over time, I had quite a collection of them. And some of them could have been, song lyrics or just straight prose. And for me, they were touchstones on certain parts of my life that actually had emotional content and were challenging. Some were just absolutely silly and funny. And as time went by, I just figured, well, here I am in my 60s. Now I'm 74 now. I started writing this about 3 years ago, but I had all these notes from decades before. And I said, well, the best way to start would be in the beginning. So I started with my birth, when my father came home from Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and I wanted to put the reader into the mindset of me as a young boy and what I experienced, because we all have similar stories to tell. And being in the business for as long as I have been, people know me as the actor and the roles I played, but I wanted them to know that we're all people first, artists and actors second. So I just felt it was time to do a nod to and a thank you to all of my family members that supported me during the good times and bad, and that we all have the same opportunity.
Right. So let's get into your dad a bit. You said that he was sent out to Hiroshima to take pictures of the devastation. Is that correct?
That was part of his activities when he was there. My father was John Sloan Berryman. He was a surgeon. He was a lieutenant in the Marine Corps attached to the Navy. And after they dropped the 2 bombs, being a brain surgeon and neurologist, the Defense Department said, hey, this guy's sharp. Let's send him to Ground Zero and see if we can garner any information of the effects on survivors or non-survivors.
How soon after they dropped it?
A very good question. I'm not exactly sure. I would say within a month.
Oh, wow. So there was still a lot in the air.
Oh, Lord, yes. It was very hot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very hot. I have pictures that he took of shadows of vaporized humans that were infused into cement walls. Most of the casualties were civilians. It was excruciatingly challenging for him to be there. And when he came home, he was obviously radiated, and radiation causes birth defects. And then, guess what? As soon as he came home, I have letters that he had sent, some letters that he sent to my mom, and one of them said, it was from here when he was in Hiroshima, and he goes, I can't wait to get out of this area where I'm at. It's, pretty dour. It's pretty depressing, and I can't wait to get back home to be with you, my mother, and have another child. And that was me.
Right. And so you, I don't know the proper terminology. I know it's ectodermal dysplasia.
It's hypohydrotic ectodermal dysplasia with synostosis of the cranium.
So I don't even want to try and repeat that. So what exactly does that mean?
Well, the radiation causes birth defects at the chromosomal level, and it affects my skin. The ends of my fingers and toes are not fully developed. They stop at the knuckles. Most of them were open wounds. My cranium was fused. It had no soft spots or fissure spots that actually are part of the expansion of the skull to accommodate the brain as it gets larger. And the area from my upper jaw to my top of my eye sockets, that part of my skull was also smaller than it should be. And I did have hair, and I was born about 7 weeks premature. In 1948, that was a pretty big deal. I was in an incubator, I was told, and my dad being a brain surgeon and my mom a nurse, and I had other family members that were doctors and nurses, and my dad had a odd sense of humor. He would say, yes, you were so small when we finally had permission to bring you home. We gave you excellent care, but when we put you in the crib, in the bassinet, we couldn't find you. You were so small. So he was joking, and he said, yeah, we used put a blanket inside of a shoebox. That was your original bassinet. I said, really?
Yeah. So your dad was a funny guy too.
He was. He was from a British background, very much clinical in the sense of he was a wonderful doctor. He didn't care what insurance companies thought, whatever. He wanted all of his patients to have the very best of care. That was his Hippocratic oath. He took it seriously. He had a wonderful sense of humor. My mom was very supportive and loving, and she was a nurse. My dad, as an example of his sense of humor, I would say grammar school, I bring home a report card. And I remember one day he was looking at my report card and he says, well, you have some good grades here, but I think you can do better with your report cards. You have a really good brain. I've seen it. And there's no smart response to that, because when I had to have my skull cut apart so it would accommodate my brain and not cause my death or blindness because of constriction within the skull itself, at Children's Hospital this took place. And I'm very fortunate and grateful for their help. He was gowned up, and being a brain surgeon, he couldn't do the surgery, but he kind of mentored them through it. Mm-hmm. He was one of the top neurologists around. So,
what a good person to have in the room, though.
Very much so.
Yeah.
He was tops in the whole Western Hemisphere, so to speak, as far as neurology.
Yeah. You mentioned in your book he used to run tests where he would send a signal from one side of your skull to the other side of your skull to see if the center of your brain was off-centered, correct?
That is correct. He had one of the first Texas Instruments oscilloscopes, and what he did was he would put a signal, and it would go pass through the skull, and then out the other side. So on the oscilloscope screen, you could see blip, blip, and in the middle, there would be a left side, right side for the cavities, the sinus cavities up in the center of the brain. So if they are offline, then that means something is a growth, perhaps like a tumor, for instance. He actually, at home, he had an office where he had literally slabs of brain encased in acrylic, which he would use. He taught some postgraduate work for surgeons. And he also had jars with tumors that he had removed as a brain surgeon from various patients. And some of the slabs of brain cross-sections had big areas where there was a vacancy, where something went wrong. So I was always amazed at how this wonderful bag of flesh we have, how it functions, how it works. My dad had he was brilliant. I talked to other doctors that knew him over the years. They said, "Oh, Sloan Berryman, man, the guy was just brilliant." He would say things like, "I have done many autopsies, and I've never found the soul. Where do you think it is?"
It took a second for it to click with me.
Yeah, no, well, me too. It's good. In my head, I'm going, that's like a trick question. I want to impress my dad with my wonderful brain knowledge, and the best I can come up with is, I don't know, Dad.
Yeah, I know.
I'm not sure.
It reminded me of this saying where a doctor says, "I've cut open many bodies and I've never found a soul." To where I respond, "Well, while you were there, have you ever found a thought?"
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. And so I would imagine your dad is a big part of why you were so into science growing up.
Yes, very much. And then when I went to high school, of course, I studied chemistry and physics, which I found fascinating. Yeah. So,
Right.
yeah, I've always been intrigued with the science, yeah.
And you went to St. Martin of Tours, correct?
That's correct.
You know, I found it fascinating that a Catholic school had science class.
Well, actually, they did not.
Oh, they didn't?
The science I was referring to was in high school.
Oh, high school. I thought that was Catholic school too, though.
It was. I didn't have a choice. My mom insisted.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, okay, Mom. What are you going to say? No, Mom, I want to go to Samuel High. I want to go to, I actually wanted to go to the city-sponsored school because I thought I would meet more students that had a wider range of not ethnicity, but different cultural and social economic levels.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we grew up in this on the west side of Santa Monica, a little more white breadish. People were great, but I wanted to assimilate more. And I know that going to grammar school, Catholic grammar school, made my mother happy. She was Catholic. My father was Presbyterian, and I wanted to be more like a regular kid as opposed to somebody who's kind of cloistered or overly protected. Now, at that point, of course, looking different after my skull surgery, and I mentioned it in the book what it's like to be teased. You're the odd duck. You're the one with you're the chicken with the spot on it. So I wanted to fit in more so than be overly protected. I wanted to have the grit and understanding of a more expansive societal approach to life, and not be overly protected. I always had a very strong sense of self, and I knew I was a good person. And I had quite the affinity for friendship, honesty, and loyalty, but I also had an abhorrence of mean behavior. What I found different, and I mentioned this in It's All Good, dealing with Catholic, being Catholic and raised by, being taught by nuns, etc., and we get deeper into that in the book, is that there is a big difference between religion, spirituality concepts, and dogma. Not a big fan of dogma.
Right. And that's the side of religion I believe everybody's very accustomed to is the control of it.
Correct. It's control. It's interesting that you use the word control because the hierarchy are very controlling, and I think that the individual wants to believe, and if they follow the concepts and rules, commandments, whatever of the liturgy of that particular belief system, they feel they're being compliant, but I don't think it's wise to be compliant without understanding the ramifications or the effects of that compliance. And the compliance is based upon certain rules and regulations, and I think that's a limiting factor to someone's vision.
Oh, a lot of the compliance is based out of fear too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that fear turns into a paycheck.
Yep.
Pass the basket, collection plate, and they're always asking for more and more money.
How is that ethically correct? I've always wondered how they do that and get away with it.
It's traditional. It's it was different than penance. I guess back. I studied a lot of Catholic history, of course, in high school and in 7 years of Catholic school, grammar school, and I learned throughout history that if someone was powerful or wealthy in a family and they wanted to keep the church happy because they had a lot of clout, they had a lot of say in society, and they could basically give money to the church to get they could purchase forgiveness,
right?
Which I saw as a young child. I said, well, this has got to be hypocrisy.
Yeah.
That can't be right.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
It makes dollars and cents.
Yeah, it makes sense with a T.
Yes, correct.
What I find interesting is a big part of your book took place in the Catholic school, both in elementary school and in high school as well. Were you able to pull things away from Catholic school, despite how shitty it was sometimes, that you carried with you for the rest of your life?
Oh yes, yeah. There are moral and spiritual principles that I was exposed to and introduced to in Catholic school that are profound, important, and I think correct principles that I still hold dear to my heart to this day. The basics. It's kind of Hippocratic in the sense of do no harm. What goes around comes around. The carpenter laid out some really good concepts. What happens to the least of us happens to us all. It's harder for someone to pass through the eye of a needle. All of those various symbolic sayings have some. They've been thought through. They have some import and they have some wisdom in there. So the basic commandments, not the church commandments, I found to be very tolerable and honorable. The ones, of course, that were hypocrisy and controlling and selfish from the point of view of the institution of Catholicism. I pretty much got rid of them. I explained in my memoir how one of the most obvious ones was this. When we had a child in school, and I'm talking as early as second or third grade, misbehaved, the nun would take like a wooden pointer, and we'd all have to hold our hands out, and they would crack us across our knuckles. Well, you'd go to jail these days if you did that, but this was the late 1950s and early 60s. And at the ends of a lot of my fingers when I was very young, the flesh wasn't fully developed, so there would be open, bloody wounds, and I would have bandages on them. And I remember one day, I mentioned in the book, I would hold my hands out, and the nun was going to smack me, but then figured, well, maybe I shouldn't. And then I called her out, and I said, well, if you don't hit me and you hit everybody else, I'm going to, catch hell out in the playground. And she wasn't quite sure what to do. I mentioned in the book what happened after that. I started to see hypocrisy from all loving and caring God, so to speak. This institution had its own set of rules. There was the commandments, and then there was the church had its own commandments that they made up, like don't eat meat on Friday. Very early on, about fourth grade, I would say, it struck me as there's some adult hypocrisy that I'm being fed here. And what I meant by that is, for instance, sin. Now, supposedly we're on earth, and everything that we do that's wrong, there's a venial sin, which is short-term in purgatory, which is, by the way, the same pain and suffering as hell. Okay, so you just get a little bit of hell for a while until you burn away that sin debt, as I call it. And then there were mortal sins, which meant you're going to hell, like murder and a few other things. Well, the church said you can't eat meat on Friday, and that was a venial sin. So if I ate meat on Friday, when I die, I don't get to go to heaven. I got to go to purgatory, and they ingrained in us and explained to us over and over and over again what kind of pain hell is. The higher concept they were trying to get to was not being close to the Lord, or God is the biggest of all pain and suffering. Well, the lesser suffering was that of I cut my finger with a thorn. I fell down and broke my leg. I have a compound fracture. I've got cancer. They're burning me at the stake. They're shooting me full of arrows. And they started to overwhelm us with these ideas of it's good to be a martyr because you go straight to heaven and you bypass any sin that burning away in purgatory. And I go, wait a minute, where are they going with this?
And a martyr means you die for your religion, correct?
That's correct. So if we did well in a task in class, in grammar school, they would give us a holy card. And a holy card was like a player card, and they would have a picture, a name, and a depiction of a saint. And they would all be depicted due to the notoriety of how horribly they were tortured and murdered. Like, I think it's St. Ignatius, where they bound the poor guy to a tree and filled him full of arrows. So sometimes we'd have visiting priests come and talk to us about, being good, don't go to hell, follow the rules, which, okay. And then they would explain to us even more hideous ways of, how various saints, were horribly mistreated. And I started, so it created this whole fear thing. Boy, I better behave, or I'm going to have to endure all this pain after at the end of my life, I have to have a whole bunch of pain.
And how old are you when you're thinking these kinds of things?
10, 11.
Yeah, that's scary. So they're pushing these to you, and you're very young.
Exactly. So that became the beginning of my, not decline, but my, maybe there's some of this ain't quite so cool.
Right. I've got a similar story. I was taking a Sunday school when I was a kid, and one day we're in class, and they start handing out these pieces of paper of Jesus, and with crayons next to it. And I was mind blown at how serious the conversations were downstairs, and then I go upstairs, and now we have to color these pages with, pink and purple crayons. And I don't know, it was just that kind of unblurred the lines for me. I was like, okay, I don't think I'd be coloring Jesus. And so you had also performed for the church, right? You in many ways consider that your first acting role.
Yes, true, actually, yes. Yeah. I was an altar boy.
How was that?
It was very cool in the beginning. Some of my other buddies in school were altar boys too, and we would do the groovy thing. There were people that would go to church every morning, which was fine because it's a special time. It's 6 o'clock in the morning, or maybe it was 6:30 in the morning. The next mass I think was at 8, and it's a quiet time of the morning, and it's just a lovely time to be up and about. And it was pretty chill, laid back, and we would go through the liturgy, and you're performing. And you're trying to be respectful and keep the ambiance very spiritual, and have a space in the church where people can reflect and do whatever they need to do to deal with their particular lot in life and their relationship to their entity, God, Jesus, whatever the name might be. And so it was pretty laid back. On the weekends was the Sunday masses, and I found the people that went to the earlier masses seemed to be the most calm and secure in their spirituality. As far as they were pretty chilled out. The 9 o'clocks on the Sunday, that's when there would be the big families, Red Skelton's family, Dennis Day's family, all of the Catholics that were in show business.
Hiltons, I believe.
Of course, the Hiltons went to school with Baron Hilton, and Red Skelton, of course, his son Richard. And it was a societal, it was, that's kind of where people kind of meet and mingle. And the when you're doing communion, you take a gold-plated, it's called a paten, and you hold it under people's chins. So if there's any crumbs from the host and it falls down, it's out of respect, which is fine. And I mentioned in my book what it's like to see people, sticking their tongue out to receive, and you'll have to read the book because some of the stuff I mentioned is pretty cute. And then, of course, if one of your buddies is kneeling to get communion, we would take the pat and we'd bump them in the throat with it, just because they have to behave. But we're part of the show, so it was just kind of a wink, fun stuff.
Well, and I loved that about the book, is that it was written through the eyes of the child Michael Berryman.
Thank you very much. That's exactly correct. From the very first page, I described, I'll take you on a journey when you read It's All Good, and I'm going to place you in that comfortable theater chair inside the mind of this boy, which will become your space in your mind, and you are seeing everything through his eyes. Mm-hmm. That's the point of view and perspective from the very beginning of the book that I invite you to sit down and take this journey with me.
Right. Well, and it's at the end of every single chapter, there's something to learn, whether it's something positive and funny and cute to read, or something that's much darker and kind of gives you perspective of not only how you could handle things better and go through life understanding that sometimes just pushing forward and adjusting
is all you can do.
Is all you could do. And that's something I loved about the book. I don't want to give too much away about any chapter. We got to implore people to go read it. There's some information that you give towards the end of your days in Catholic school and elementary school that was quite horrifying. Mm-hmm. But moving into high school, things seemed to have brightened up on an educational level. It seemed like you really started to blossom in terms of what you were into and the electives you chose.
That is true. Well, from 1962 to 1966, that was my high school era. And it was also a period of time when I got involved with scuba diving, golf, surfing, body surfing, because I can't stay on a board on my feet, I'll fall over. Wonderful adventures, making friends for life that to this day I'm still good friends with, becoming my own man to a certain degree, and that process continued on for quite a while. But I also discovered that there was a revolution going on in philosophy and humanity, and it was the 60s revolution. And the music changed from Chuck Berry and Elvis to just wide open. Everything. I had a record collection, everything from jazz to blues. Some of the artists I had, let me see, John Mayall and the Blues Breakers, to
Bob Seger.
Pete Seeger, Bob Seger, Joan Baez, Peter, Paul, and Mary, Bob Dylan, who I wound up working 4 years later at his home as a guard, Simon and Garfunkel, and I've seen all of these performers. I used to hang out at a place called the Troubadour. I would hop on the blue bus that the Doors talk about, Jim Morrison. I've seen the Doors. My sister was midwife for John Densmore. That era of the 60s was fantastic. In one of my biology classes, one day the teacher on the chalkboard says, I'm going to write something on the board, and if you think you know what it means, because we had a daily quiz 5 days a week, and you would get a passing grade if you just did well on each of those quizzes, irregardless of the final test. I go, okay. So he wrote on the board, "The Beatles are coming," and only a few of us knew what that meant. So we'd go up there and whisper, and he'd go, "Yeah, you get 10 points. Okay, great." So no, and nobody knew who the Beatles were, and the Beatlemania started, and.
They went on the Ed Sullivan Show.
Ed Sullivan Show,
Yeah.
Sure. I had the early Rolling Stones albums. Everything from folk rock to acid rock. Jefferson Airplane, Jeff Beck, Beckola, great album.
Yeah.
There's so much there. It was very eclectic, and I got to meet Joni Mitchell.
at the Troubadour, right?
At the Troubadour as a junior in high school. I was out of my mind. She was beautiful, gorgeous, talented, and I skipped class with a buddy of mine who played a wonderful Martin guitar. We hopped on the Santa Monica bus, went up Santa Monica Boulevard to the Troubadour at 2:30 in the afternoon. I sold advertisements for the school yearbook, so I had these, the dean's office. The dean was a real scary guy, but I could go into his office and I could get these little, he had a tear-off pamphlet, and his signature was on a stamp, so I stamped about 50 of these. I sold some to my buddies, so you wouldn't get dinged and have to do Saturday detention.
Yeah.
And it was get out of class, and I would go sell yearbook advertising, and occasionally I would use it to grab my buddy, and we'd go to the Troubadour and catch a warm-up show, because at night we were. We would have to be at home, but they were doing a sound check, whatnot, or 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and you could talk one-on-one with the performers. That was just heavenly, yeah. So I became a big fan of lyrics and good music.
What's interesting about the time is that it feels like the people in the 60s and 70s were just so over all it seemed like human experiments of the 40s and 50s, to where it was like everybody made it a point, like, hey, no, it is about peace and love now.
It was peace and love, because we as children grew up with parents that ended the war to end all wars.
Yeah.
Then when I went to the university and was an avid reader, I had a library card and all that good stuff. I started to study journals from various military leaders and writers, and you start studying political history and sociology, and you realize, wow, we're all have more in common than not. And I took an economics course, the professor was brilliant, and a lot of conflicts are created out of need or greed, and the ones that are created out of greed are the ones that Bob Dylan talks about in the song "The Masters of War." I had this conversation with Bobby on a few occasions, and then I started to study. I had a lot of friends. They were in the military. There was a company in Santa Monica called the RAND Corporation, a think tank. When I was in high school, some friends and I were pretty good students, and we got to do strategy sessions at a company called Systems Development Corporation, and these were the first early computer strategy games. And we were all anti-war hippies, so to speak, but we were fascinated with not propaganda, but fascinated with how do you convince young men to go fight, and the adversary is on somebody else's soil, so to speak. And then you start studying political science and economics, and a lot of things are based on economics and finance more so than legitimate intervention, I would say.
What was culture like around then? Was everybody kind of, I mean, I'd be scared shitless that I'd get drafted any minute.
My draft number was 12, so I knew I would be drafted right away. I also knew I had medical issues that would probably make me not, they couldn't use me, so to speak. So I took ROTC for 2 years. That gave me a deferment for 2 years. And there was also 2 units as opposed to, for the first 2 years at the university, we were obligated to take at least 1 PE class, which took more time than the 2-unit course in studying military history, which was 2 units. So I said, well, I'll take military history. And then once a week you go out and you're in your uniform and you march around and you get qualified with your rifle. For me, I'm an expert with the M1 Garand. I qualified at 100 meters. My sergeant major was Sergeant Major Meehan, one of the original 10 Green Beret. My family were avid NRA members, and we reloaded and target shot at the police range since I was probably 12 or 13 years old. So very facile with the gun safety, and it needs to be done a certain way. And that's the way you do it, So safety is really important. We could talk at a later date on Brandon Lee and other situations, but I started to understand that there was an agenda larger than what we pay homage to in the Pledge of Allegiance, so to speak, as far as Americans. And the lesson that I heard this from was from a 5-star general and president of the United States. His name was Dwight D. Eisenhower. And I believe it was in his farewell address, he mentioned our biggest problematic situation, which is the military-industrial complex. And that opened up my eyes. And then, like I say, knowing people that worked in the aerospace industry and people that worked on making missiles and stuff like that. My family knew some of them. I had conversations with them over Thanksgiving dinner, for instance. And
that was something that I remember from your book. You said that your uncle was in the aerospace industry and that he had a lot to say about extraterrestrial life and UFO sightings, right?
Yes, he did. He was actually one of the structural engineers for the leading edge of the X-15. He helped design the honeycomb structure of that wing, which helped with the structural integrity at high speeds and heat dispersion. It was very beneficial for the craft and the pilot to be in a plane that had that type of integrity. I remember seeing the pictures of Hiroshima and Nagasaki that my father took, and when you look at a wall and you see black shadows, and you realize those used to be living, breathing civilians. And then when you study military history and you hear of a gentleman named LeMay, and you understand Fahrenheit 451, and you understand about Dresden, an open city, but let's practice while we have the chance to see what an incendiary bomb will do. It removes oxygen. We don't have to rebuild the structures. We just remove the oxygen, and all the occupants are dead. So we just tidy them up, and we don't have to, get bulldozers and rebuild a city. I'm not saying that was exactly their purpose, but maybe it had something to do with it.
Yeah.
So I started to see hypocrisy, and I started to see something else, especially after Bob Dylan's song and doing some reading in some science journals. Because, there was always, bigger, better, stronger, more deadly, more dangerous. And I also, in these conceptual conversations, there was always that kid in me. And I don't mean a kid that's not mature. I mean youthful innocence, which was imbued in the adult's mind. And I was an avid reader of Mad Magazine, and I also liked some of the old cartoons in black and white, because the people that did the early cartoons, that a lot of them are not politically correct these days. And I have met some of the people that either their parents or them as an older man or woman produced and wrote and directed and did the panels for some of those cartoons, were what you would call beatniks, which would be the counterculture of the 50s and late 40s. And these are very compassionate, humanistic people. And these cartoons, even Mad Magazine, it's fun for the kid. It's also wink, wink, and fun for the grown-ups. Mm-hmm. So I appreciated that combination of I see you, kid, here's something to you to entertain, and I see you, the kid's parent, here's something at a higher level, more conceptual level than what the child is experiencing through ha 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 ha, whereas the parents are going, yeah, I see the irony in that, oh man. So I thought that was a wonderful gift for an artist, a writer, an illustrator, a storyteller, to produce a product that could be shared and understood by an entire family, and the child and the teenager and the adult could still appreciate it years later and conceptualize and discuss the deeper philosophical and sociological messages that are being shared. And for a child, I think every child and every parent and every family should be able to have more moments of that than going to bed wondering if you need to sleep under the bed, but it won't protect you from a nuclear war. I love film. I loved horror movies, science fiction movies. And for instance, in the movie Matinee with John Goodman, Joe Dante's film, Joe's a good friend of mine, and when the little girl gets in trouble for not practicing duck and cover, and she's explaining to the class what a nuclear bomb would do. Ducking under your desk wouldn't protect you.
Yeah.
Rod Serling, same thing in Twilight Zone. I really appreciate honesty that's told in an allegorical manner.
So the times back then, I mean, the general public was afraid of nuclear war. I mean, what a
Terrified.
what a relevant time to be talking about it. Other than now, I mean, now we're on the brink of it as well, and it's sad to see that decades later we still haven't come to that solution.
No, we have not. We have not, and it's mind-boggling that so much of a country's budgets are in that realm. It's just like when Bob Dylan says, all you masters of war that make all the big bombs, I'll be glad to stand over your grave when you're dead. He doesn't wish them dead. What he's trying to say is, your sales pitch is fear, your product is death, and it's a never-ending cycle. How do we break that cycle?
Yeah.
Come on, people now, smile on your brother and love one another right now. So that theme and that message was contradicted by the other side of society, meaning the conservative. Well, to me, conservative means you conserve your water, you keep your soil clean, you don't dam and poison your rivers so they catch on fire. I mentioned I have a big section in my book about that before a lot of the rivers were dammed and before North Dakota was a state and the Native Americans and my great-grandfather and my grandmother. I love that. I love the story about when it's Christmas and Sophie and her sister are trying to stay awake in North Dakota at the house, and it's winter, and she knows the Native Americans are going to come and bring presents, and they would always fall asleep, and then they'd wake up in the morning, the presents were there, and the Native Americans were not there, Yeah, it's sort of it's kind of a magical chapter. It's one of my
Yeah.
favorite chapters.
I mean, what an interesting time that they lived in as well. You were mentioning that your grandmother, Sophie, and that side of the family has always been extremely close with the indigenous tribes of the area, correct?
Correct.
So how was that growing up around that? Were there any kind of things that you noticed that they had done vastly different than we did?
Well, they shared they shared the moments in time. For instance, my Sophie was from German ancestry, and her husband was Swedish. I was Gil. He painted cars. His family came from Sweden, and his family was the court painters for the King and Queen of Sweden. And when he came to America and to see the Seattle area, he painted houses. He also painted cars with a brush. And there's a wonderful story I tell about the Native American who wanted his car painted, and nobody would paint an Indian's car except my Swedish, dumb Swede grandfather. I appreciate very much the imagery of Sophie's stories because they're very pictorial. They put you in the atmosphere of that time and place, and you get the emotional content of how people felt and how people saw things, and how people dealt with situations. It's one of my favorite chapters. I think someone should make a short subject film, and can you imagine being the prop guy to get to be with the art director to paint that car the way I describe it?
With the eagle on the front.
Don't tell too much.
Oh, sorry.
No, how did you feel? I mean, it's a beautiful story.
I thought that I saw the car.
Oh, of course
I
you
thought that
would.
I saw the car. It was a very visual chapter for me. And she seemed very important in your life. She seemed like a very, very sweet person. And I will tell you,
was.
I've never craved apple pie and a slice of sharp cheddar cheese in my life before until reading the book with Sophie.
Thank you,
I
yeah.
didn't even know those two things went together.
There you go. Very well. Well, yeah, her ism was apple pie without the cheese.
Don't tell me. Hold on, what's the last word? I know it rhymes.
Cheese.
So
Apple pie without the cheese is like a
it's like a kiss without a squeeze.
squeeze.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a hug without a squeeze.
Yeah.
Right?
So say it together on three. Apple pie without the cheese is like a kiss.
I thought it was like a hug.
No, it's like a kiss with a.
From
It's
the
like
top.
a hug with. Now we both got it wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, one time for sure.
Is it kiss or is it hug?
Apple pie without the cheese is like a kiss without the squeeze.
I almost said hug again. I could never be an actor.
You silly rabbit.
But no, I mean, I loved that story. And, another story with Sophie specifically, I'll let you take it away because I don't want to give too much out, but that she had gotten very ill when she was younger, and the Native Americans had a lot to do with her
They saved her life.
surviving. Yeah.
Yeah.
It stood out to me. I was like, the medicine we get from the store, sure, a lot of the stuff that's in the medicine is pulled from the ground, but it's not the organic. It's not the, straight from the source. And the fact that they've
made some improvements, but then there's also, like my father Sloan said, they should never eradicate opium.
Yeah.
Not because he liked junkies, he was a neurologist and brain surgeon, but there are certain gifts that the creator, whoever is on the planet, there are things we should learn. I've been to the Amazon, the movie with Shaken, Not Stirred. I forget what.
Sean Connery?
Yeah, he did a movie about deforestation of the lungs of the earth. It's just like the wonderful movie The Emerald Forest. Great film.
Yeah.
Papa, the frogs are singing. What does that mean? Well, it really happened. The frogs were singing, and the rain really heavy, and that dam in South America, and it collapsed. I've been very blessed to go to Guyana and various places deep in the jungle with my Italian friends making a couple films, and you really get the sense of this is your mother.
Yeah.
We're from dust to dust, and we go back to dust.
That's crazy. You got to act in a movie in the Amazon rainforest.
Yeah, yes.
What a dream.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, let's rewind a little bit before when the acting career started.
That's book two.
Yeah, is it? Well, actually, at the end of this one, we get into...
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit.
What were some of the movies at the time that you could remember either going and seeing in theaters or something that kind of like just changed your vision on how life was around you?
Good question. Let me see. Well, I saw all the classics, Ben-Hur, Ten Commandments, et cetera, et cetera. The ones that really stuck from the theater when I was younger, I would have to say would be 2001.
Space Odyssey.
Yep.
Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah. That
Amazing movie.
Definitely was one. Well, I did like a lot of the Universal creature features, pictures. Saturday matinees were kind of something that we always appreciated. I would have to say The Exorcist. I remember talking to Linda about how that was the last time I had kind of done away with Cathol, but after seeing The Exorcist, I actually that night I will admit I actually got on my knees and said my prayers just in case and left the light on in the hallway.
Well, it's one of those movies that just blows you away. You're like, whoa. And Linda, being as young as she was and how amazing.
Oh, it
an
affected
actress.
her.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. She got like back issues. And,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, that was insane. It was a grueling production, but the movie, I mean, when I saw it, I was young as well. And it was just like, oh my God, there's somebody my age getting possessed. Usually you see in horror movies, it's the adults that are getting fucked with.
Yeah.
So it was the innocence of Linda Blair in that situation is what made it so scary.
It's very scary, and subsequently, I would say, around high schoolish, and then a couple times when I was in college. But as early as early in high school, I met some Jesuits that either had performed or knew those that actually were the good ones that performed some exorcists.
Real ones.
Actually, real ones.
And now did they document these and show it to you, or they just told you stories?
No, they told me straight up they were hands-on. They were either performing or assisting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What were some of those stories? Just rip one.
Well, pretty much what was in the film The Exorcist. The atmosphere, the chilling cold in the room, all of a sudden. The draining effect it has emotionally and psychologically and spiritually on those that are dealing with and trying to exercise the entity, the spirit, the energy of that particular spirit. Mm-hmm. I had, and I think I mentioned in the book, there's times when I had bad dreams. And what I would do in a dream, I knew it was a dream, but I couldn't wake up from the dream. So part of my personality was a real F-you attitude. So I would say, okay, where's the entity? Where's the bad guy? Where's the creature? And I would go, okay, here we go. And I would literally run right, like in the Matrix, I would literally run right into and just have a strong belief that it was a dream, and I would wake up okay. But I basically kind of wanted it over with. And then there was the other dreams, like when I have the boots and I can fly at night over L.A. at night.
Gorilla hand.
Gorilla hand, yeah.
People are like, what the hell are they talking about?
Oh, those.
You got to read the book.
Yeah, I had very vivid dreams.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I liked having nightmares when I was younger.
I did too.
Yeah, you wake up and you're like, oh, thank God, life never seems so beautiful after a nightmare.
That's the point. Why did people go on a roller coaster, a scary ride, or jump out of a perfectly good airplane?
Yeah.
I've known people that have gone skydiving for the first time there, and they said, I was terrified, and then when I landed, it all kind of was okay, but the big exhale, so to speak,
I heard that's how the concept of haunted houses were actually created. There were these theme parks when they just started building roller coasters. The other neighboring theme parks who couldn't afford it would go, "Fuck, man, I can't put up no damn roller coasters. It cost millions of dollars." So they would put together a haunted house to give people that cheap thrill, that cheap adrenaline dump.
That's pretty darn cool. Why do people ride motorcycles? Why do people do a lot of things? And it's not because they're adrenaline junkies. It's just whoa! I almost had a whoa, and then I'm okay. And what I feel that it does is it's not the risk factor that people are after, or the I can challenge fate. It's more of where you wind up. You wind up in an appreciative manner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever skydived before?
You're not getting me to jump out of a perfectly good airplane.
Yeah, me neither.
Ain't happening.
Me neither. Heights are my one thing.
Oh, I used to climb trees with chainsaw and top them, that kind of stuff, in my late 20s and early 30s, and never had a problem, but had some close calls of unexpected circumstances. But I survived because I had good safety techniques, and I had a good ground person, and I always seek out the best people when I'm learning and training something. I says, what do I need to know? I'm listening, and guide me through it. And that's just a good idea. You can't Google everything. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What I like about the horror genre is that it really does give you that opportunity to dance with death. You know, it gets you closer to, it answers certain questions. You know, what would happen if me and my family were driving our Winnebago and mutants in the mountain threw some stuff in our tires? You know, it answers those questions for us.
Yeah, well, the answer to the question is stay on the main road.
And keep your fucking dogs in your van.
Yeah.
Or on a leash.
Yeah.
It pissed me off. The first one, I'm like, all right, hopefully they find them. The second one, I'm like, all right, you guys are bad dog owners. It was like Beauty and Beast, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Which took me a long time to find out it was for Beauty and the Beast. A surprisingly long time. So would you say that there were any movies you saw during the time that influenced your career? I mean, I know acting was kind of something that just fell into your lap, but there was clearly something in you that loved performing.
Interesting. I'm kind of 50-50 on saying yes to that. The part of me that had no problems performing would probably be me with that ethical, don't be mean to people, because I felt like a protector to Billy Hopkins, my friend with the polio survivor, and his the metal braces that he had and he walked with, and I couldn't stand mean behavior, being teased or ridiculed. I figured, well, to myself, having the experience of my mother and father explaining and having me actually meet various people with syndromes and situations makes you appreciate that which you do have that works and functions normally. Because you can be perfect and handsome and beautiful and smart and slip on a bar of soap in the shower, and all of a sudden you're dependent on other people. So every day is a gift. And I appreciated living moment to moment. And some of the films that helped me appreciate that was actually a television. And one of them was Sea Hunt with Lloyd Bridges. Yes, he went on adventures. Sometimes he worked with the police or whatever. But a lot of times it was the adventure of going out into the ocean, which I really liked. And as a matter of fact, reading his book, Lloyd Bridges' book, where he explains he got this TV show and he had never gone scuba diving, and then it became a sport, something that he and his entire family appreciated. And so I said, I need to try it. There's something that drew me in to this wonderful world beneath the sea. So that got me involved in appreciating nature even more, because there's a whole different world under the ocean. And gosh, I wish it was 50 years ago and people would not pollute it. I mean, I see when I am on YouTube or something, and I see pictures where people are divers or cutting gill nets that people just toss aside when they're no longer using them, and they run for a mile, and they wrap around the wonderful air-breathing mammals, the whales, and other sea life, and they just have a slow demise. I mean, who in the world in their right mind would even do that? Why would they not be responsible? I thought adults are supposed to be responsible as a kid. We're supposed to become an adult and appreciate, and no, not everybody does. And now we live with challenges where I talk to a lot of youth at the conventions, and I tell them, I said, look, when I was your age, I was told that the world's going to come to an end in a nuclear holocaust, and then that would keep me awake at night. What keeps you awake at night? And they're so aware these days. It's not just because of social media; it's just because they're not stupid, and they don't take to the sugar-coated Pollyanna approach. Yeah, everything's fine. It's just,
Well, our access to information now is bar none, exponentially better than it was before. In the 60s and 70s, you could probably be lied to and they could get away with it. Now it's impossible. I mean, something happens 10 minutes later, it's on Twitter.
That's correct. When I was a legal career, I saw maps of the world in the 80s that just depicted, of course, the corporate globalism. And I've talked to many billionaires, and there's good ones and not so good ones. And some say we do the best we can, and others say, yeah, we run the whole show. So that being said, I was just watching the news this morning. There were some athletes. I appreciate athletes, and they work really, really hard to get to the level that they're at. And they get signed on again for another $224 million for 1 year's. Well, people don't make that in a lifetime,
Yeah,
So
and it's like 8 games.
Yeah, I'm very happy for them, but something's missing. I don't want to get into all the theories of where the world's going and are we going to be turned into a battery or that's why I like science fiction. The short stories by Aldous Huxley, H.G. Wells, for instance. The Machine Stops. That's a great one. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend read The Machine Stops by H.G. Wells, and it really puts you in focus. To answer your question about some of the movies, Logan's Run, Fahrenheit 451, Andromeda Strain, Omega Man, Soylent Green. These were all brilliant cautionary science fiction tales that got me involved into the concept of telling stories and also cinematographically how they were filmed. Like in Omega Man, when Charlton Heston is driving around town, those are long takes. Those are crane shots, crane shots that are panoramic that they don't intercut for maybe up to a minute. And I started to really appreciate how the director photographed it and how it created mood and how it put you in that situation. I didn't fully understand it until I got into the industry, but at the time it resonated, and I would say the writer, director, producer were very proficient in bringing me into that experience. That's what storytelling is about. I love the idea of someone back in the indigenous era, for instance, or even modern day tribal, let's say. Someone comes back to the village and they says, "Oh, you won't believe what I saw today," and they'll do a cave drawing, or they tell a story, or they'll do it in an allegorical sense. They'll do a dance and a song about it, and it's passed on by tradition. Now, tradition, via whatever tribe you're associated with, I think it's a bummer when those come to a dead end. That's why when I was in college, people studied anthropology and cultural anthropology. They were very fascinating people for me to have a conversation with because they helped carry on the tradition that might not be from some of the tribal family members. I've met many indigenous people who are modern-day families who at the time were thinking, well, I'm a modern whatever, fill in the blank, and I don't need to keep telling those fairy tales or those tales or those legends of my history. So don't trash your history. Just understand and preserve, and so it doesn't get lost.
Yeah.
Like in, let's see, there's a very famous sci-fi movie, Fahrenheit 451, where they burn books. And
Which is a true story. They did that in Egypt. They set a library on fire.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, at the end of the movie, there's a guy and a gal and the love interest. Anyway, they escape, and they wind up in their place where there's these elders, and everybody's matched up with a couple of elders, and they learn, even as a young child especially, from an early age, and they memorize an entire book. Like they introduce the adults, they're not going to live forever, but they have memorized an entire book. Books have become illegal, so they live on the fringe. They live in the wild zones, away from the cities, etc. And they say, "Hi, this is Tom Sawyer. Hi, this is so and so." And they're a book, and then they spend all their time with this adult, so they have memorized and can pass on the book before the elder passes away, and that story comes to an end and is no longer available.
So let's get back to the H.G. Wells story that you were saying that you read. That's one of the more fascinating concepts. It was about the push button society where they lived underground, right?
Yes, it's called the Machine Stops.
Yeah, and that's kind of like where we're at now.
Very much so. Very, very close.
Yeah.
Just like on our drive out, and at a convention I did a few weeks ago, talking to people that the new cars today, they track everything that you do, and it goes to a computer. And even on the news, I saw it this morning before you picked me up, and the information from the new vehicles, every left turn, how fast you go, when you go, if you're late on a car payment, they'll shut your engine off and have your car towed away. But even if that's not the case, like when our driver was a police officer off duty, was taking us to the show a few weeks ago, we had to go against traffic because there was a bad accident, and the computer in the car didn't know there was an accident and said, "You're going the wrong way. You can't drive on this side of the road. We're going to shut the engine off." Well, holy mother. So it's like a tattletale. It keeps score. After a while, it'll just say, you can't drive this anymore, and it's got so many modules and transistors and whatever. You couldn't fix it if you had to. I drive a 1986 four-wheel drive Ford because it's fixable, and you can't shut it down from a satellite or a drone. Sorry.
Yeah, that is crazy.
So that push-button society is like a cashless society. I learned at the university, my economics professor said the day that there's no cash is the day you've lost all your freedoms.
Yeah.
So that's why those cautionary tales are important. Now, in The Machine Stops, it's after a nuclear war, and everybody lives underground, and then there's a love story between a guy and a gal, and he works in the archives, which people kind of have forgotten about over time, and who cares about history, So everybody lives in their air-conditioned cubicle, kind of like they do in Japan, and they. I want 2 more degrees Celsius. They push a button. Pretty soon, the machine starts to break down and falter. Now, nobody's gone out. Nobody works out. Nobody goes outside. The air is clear and clean now. It's been a decade since the nuclear war. But the machines do everything. Well, if the machines stop running, then what happens? Well, the machine starts to break down, and people revert to survival skills, and it gets chaotic and violent. And then, of course, at the end of the story, I mentioned in my book how it happens, and it's a very awakening reveal as to, whoa, maybe some of this old school stuff is worth having. And then,
well, that's why preserving history is important, is so you can learn from the mistakes of the past. No, and I
hope so.
Yeah, I mean, like, when we look at the 60s and 70s in Los Angeles, I mean, you've lived through the Manson murders. You've lived through the Hillside Stranglers.
Yes.
Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. Were you aware of those things going on as they were going on, specifically Charles Manson?
Oh, very much so. Very much so. I actually had met some various people in the LA area in that era. And I remember one time I stopped by a friend's house in the middle of the afternoon, and there was some guy, I'll call him a Charlie wannabe, and he was a little older, and I think these people had taken some mescaline or dropped acid or something. They were pretty high on something, and this guy was a player. I could tell he was just manipulating these people. It's like, how to become a cult leader, Well, first of all, make it a church so you don't pay taxes and blah, 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 blah. But it's basically, this guy was a deceiver. And, I just had ridden my motorcycle over there to see my friend, and then I walked in and was just polite, and they were all listening to this guy talk. And he kind of gave me a look, and I kind of gave him a look, and I could tell that he kind of realized that I was not a fool. And when he took a moment and he says, "Oh, hi, how are you?" I says, "I'm fine. I'm Michael." And he says, "Oh, I'm so and so." And he goes, "So you've been listening for a while. Well, what do you think?" And I said the following. I said, "I think." Well, this is really bad. I go, "I think you're a predator. I think you're full of shit. I think you want to take advantage of these people, and I think you want to take advantage of." Not the gals. I think you've got your eye on some of the guys. Now that's not exactly what I thought, but I did that to I wanted to nudge him. I wanted to, get a response from him. And he started to qualify his intentions. Like he was a sage. He could almost levitate. He was not quite a monk yet, but he's getting there. In other words, I said, so you want people to not be compliant to you yet, but you want to be a leader. You want to have a group that adores you and look to you for guidance and wisdom. And you have an agenda, and it's all self-serving, and you're kind of sinister. So I'm going to leave, and I'm inviting anybody else in this room that, by the way, feels very cold to me, and it's a nice, sunny, beautiful day outside. I'm going to get on my motorcycle and go to the beach. Anybody want to follow me? And a couple people left with me. Yeah. And that's how I left it, because so during that era of Charlie and the others, there were a lot of
copycats.
Copycats, exactly.
Interesting. Wow. And so this guy that you met, that was post Manson.
Yeah.
So
right about the same time, Charlie had been arrested.
So people saw what was going on, and they were like, I could do that too.
Oh, sure.
Wow.
And there were people, I'm sure, doing that before Charlie.
Yeah. I've said this about 1,000 times. I sound like a broken record, but movies will match the times that we're in. The Great Depression in the 1930s, we saw the great boom of Universal monsters soon to follow. The Cold War scares in the 40s. We had Dan Siegel's Invasion of the Body Snatchers. You start getting into the 50s with Vietnam War, more of like the racism. You've got, Romero's Night of the Living Dead. And then we've got the 60s with Manson, and someone very familiar comes out with a film that changed the scope of movies forever, and it was Wes Craven's Last House on the Left.
Oh, God, yes.
Which was inspired directly from what was going on in the late 60s.
Correct. Yeah, David Hess, dear friend, miss him. It's a tough movie to watch. Yeah, but when the bad guy gets his desserts, it's like, at least he won't be around. They won't be around anymore to cause grief.
Right.
It's only a movie. Only a movie. Only a movie.
Were you always into horror films growing up, or was that something that you found later on in life?
Actually, it was early on in life, and in one of the chapters, I talk about our baby. My sister and I had a babysitter, and two of my brothers were born at the time, and they would go to bed early. So my sister and I would stay up, and we would watch TV back in the black and white TV days, and we would usually watch the Universal monsters on Friday, or I think it was Saturday night, and our babysitter would watch with us, and she'd always fall asleep while we were watching the scary movies. They were used, Frankenstein, Dracula, etc. And I remember one night, my sister was like a year and a half older, and she thought it would be really cute to turn all the lights out in the house, and I would stand by the TV because there's no remote, and you push the button, and the TV goes off, and it goes into a pinpoint, and then it glows green and then goes dark. So what she did was, my sister got her hands in a bowl of ice cubes and got her hands really, really cold. She stood behind this poor woman, and I mentioned this in the book. I was just a little teaser. And she kind of grabbed her at the back of the neck, and she wakes up big-eyed, and I turn the TV off, and there's not a light on in the house, and then the only light is the TV, and it just goes boop. And then we turn the lights back on. She's screaming. We thought it was funny until she said, "I'm going to tell your parents." And then I mentioned in the book something about coat hangers.
Yeah, I got the shit beaten out of me with hangers too. So
Yeah,
It's
the
nice
wire ones don't break.
yeah. Oh yeah, wires don't break either.
They wrap around you. But we like the scary movies. Number one, it's like the roller coaster ride. You know, you're going to survive. You might have a bad dream, but it's tempting. You go for it anyway. And you know you're going to be okay. But it's it's part of maturity. It's part of growing up. You know.
Did you have a favorite Universal classic?
Yeah, I kind of like the Frankenstein ones a lot. One of my favorite scenes, of course, is the transformation of the Wolfman during that long time lapse.
In his hotel room.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah. I love Lon Chaney in that movie.
Yeah, that's probably one of my favorite Lon moments.
I love that you were born in 48. And, those movies were coming out in like 33, so 15 years earlier.
Yeah.
And now, we're in 2023. Those movies were, 90 years ago.
Right.
And the Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff and Lon Chaney. I mean,
Peter Cushing.
Yeah, Peter Cushing. Okay, so this is actually, now I'm curious. Do you like the Hammer remakes of the original Universal
do.
Monsters? I actually kind of like them better.
Yeah, there's something about them that they have a certain quality that is not in the others. They're all legitimate, but I'm a big fan of the Hammer collections.
They're scarier.
Yeah.
Yeah, because in Dracula, you didn't really get to see Dracula do anything to anybody.
No.
It was only implied.
Now in Blackula,
Yeah.
run with that.
Yeah. Oh man, that's speaking of Tarantino, we were talking about him earlier. In his book, he talks all about the blaxploitation films of the 60s and
They're fun.
70s. Yeah, yeah.
Well, I think Ken was in some, wasn't he?
Who?
Ken Foree?
Most likely. I mean, Ken Foree was in a lot. I love Ken though. I mean, I
Ken's
think
great.
Yeah, he's such a funny actor. Just the way he says things is so fun. What? I love that. The Ken-isms are my favorite.
Yes.
Yeah. Something you said that I found interesting. You said you loved being in horror movies because you got to be a part of the viewer's solution. The viewer at the end of the movie, when the monster is defeated, they are the hero. And I found that very profound.
Well, it's true. If you have a weak antagonist, then how far does the hero or heroine have to climb up to match, meet, and hopefully subdue the adversary?
Right.
To what level of dark night of the soul? Because it's like before every soldier, every situation like that. If you have a heads up, you're going to do battle. What do you do the night before? Well, throughout history, there are rituals, there are agreements you make with yourself and God, for instance. If I survive this, you make promises a lot of times, or just please help me get through this, because sometimes that which befalls upon somebody. You're left with no choice. You run away or deal with it. You can't just sit there and do nothing. Something's going to happen. So you do what you can.
Yeah. How do you think the genre's evolved over the years?
Well, I think the genre's evolved in many ways. In some ways, I think it's still traditional in the framework of the story, how it begins, how it progresses, and how it it comes to a solution, either in favor of the hero or not. And then also you have to appreciate the fact that we have better special effects. And I think there was a period where these types of films, sci-fi and horror, for instance, where they became more effect-driven than concept or acting or theme.
Right.
Well, which is, I think it's an evolutionary process.
Yeah. Do you feel the film industry as a whole, I mean, outside of just horror, has changed as well since?
Oh, sure. I think it's, there's so much out there where I am so bored with every hero. Like Deadpool, I love Deadpool, but even in Deadpool and in The Matrix, come on, they can only they only get flesh wounds, and they kill 100 people, and they maybe get damaged to a certain degree, or if they die, they can be resurrected. I just think they become boring. But those, I think, are more studio driven and economics than storytelling. I don't want to see in graphic detail and slow motion how a weapon or a device can cause what other kind of flesh and bone and et cetera damage. I would be more interested in the traumatic. What does it do if they survive? How do they qualify it? How do they justify it? How do they see it? How do they get past it? It's like in The Crow. In the original book by James O'Barr, there's a point where Eric Draven is confronted by my character, the Skull Cowboy, and I tell him, kill the ones that killed you both. If you go beyond that point, you will not be reunited with your beloved. And then we have another conversation, and I says, well, decide or be damned. And he says, I'm already damned. It's kind of ironic according to what happened in real life, with his accident. But I do appreciate when it gets to a point where the hero has to make a decision, one way or the other. But I think that the film industry, it's become such a simple formula. I know it makes box office, so I think a lot of these films are driven for a target audience, and it's the same old. That's why I like the independent film festivals that are all over the country and the world. I like international film festivals to see how artists are taking that subject matter from their zip code and from their sociological and historical perspective. Different cultures and subcultures see and have thoughts about situations differently than people in other situations.
Right, and I love how it always shifts too, because there was a while where the Italians had like a chokehold on the horror genre.
Very much so.
Yeah,
Bava, for instance, Mario Bava.
Now I think the Koreans have it right now.
Oh Lord, yes.
Yeah.
I
mean, we've got our own up-and-coming directors here in the States. Like Ari Aster is fantastic. He made Hereditary and Midsummer. He's coming out with this movie called Beau is Afraid. He's a much more visceral director. His writing, I mean, it's a movie that doesn't scare you because there's things that are popping up on screen. He deals with grief and the stages of trauma, and you leave the movie with this uncomfortable feeling.
Good.
Good. And that's what I think something is kind of lacking in the industry today, especially with all the sequels that are coming out. Now, mind you, if I were to see a Hills Have Eyes 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, I probably wouldn't mind, as long as at the end of the day, somebody were to step in who was an actual fan of the movie in the social commentary it was making at the time and decided to make the movie with the same bravado as it originally came out with, where nowadays, it seems like they're like, let's just throw a ghost face mask at them and have them do whatever. But that's something that I find has changed since the 60s and 70s. Is there is no more social commentary, and Wes Craven was somebody who really I believe pushed horror cinema in a very different direction. And before we even get into The Hills Have Eyes and Wes, you didn't set out to be an actor in Hollywood. So can you go a little bit into how that came about and what exactly happened?
I was struggling in LA. I had not done any acting, and I got a phone call from a friend of mine, a professor of economics at Berkeley, California, and he said, our friend Mark's house burnt down to the ground. Let's go up to Washington and help him rebuild. He's staying in a neighbor's house while they're away on vacation. We got about 8 weeks to build a 2-story log home and get the roof on it before the rains come, and he and his wife can move back in. He can't afford. He bought all the materials through his insurance, but he doesn't have enough money to pay for carpenters or people to help. So I was doing odd jobs, and I go, sure. So I packed a bag and I went to Venice Beach, and I stuck my thumb out on the Coast Highway, and I got picked up by a VW van with a bunch of hippies, and we listened to some great music, shared great food, some good pot, and some of them would have. One had a pet monkey. It was cute. They all had dogs and or a cat, and fruits, vegetables, granola, whatever, eggs delight. I mean, people. It was great. It was safe. Went to Washington, helped spent about 6 weeks up there, and it was just wonderful. I love that part of the country. Near Vancouver and Seattle and in the islands area, Camano Island. And when we got done finishing the roof, I was looking to rent a little cottage or a room somewhere, or maybe at Mark's house, and trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. And I was hoping to go to Alaska and homestead, because I just love the forest, I love nature. And I figured, well, I'll meet the right woman or not. I'll continue along my life, and I'll find something to do. And this is my new adventure. And something happened, and the next thing I knew, I was back in Santa Monica, and within a 24-hour period of making a decision, one way or the other, was what made the difference between where we are today or we never would have met. Yeah, because I'm leaving the rest of that vague because it's a very interesting chapter. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I wound up back in Santa Monica and Venice Beach area, and I bumped into George Powell just by accident. I didn't know who he was till he said, "Hey, I'm George Powell. How you doing? You have an interesting face. You want to be in the movie?" And I go, "What? What are you talking about?" And then I said, "Oh, wait a minute. You made some of my favorite movies, like War of the Worlds, Journey to the Center of the Earth, Time Machine, etc." And he says, "Just call my office, and I'd like to put you in a movie called Doc Savage." And I go, "Oh, I think I could pull it off." And I got a SAG card. He paid my dues for that.
But in the moment when he asked you that question, and he offered the role to you, did it feel too good to be true? Did you believe him right away?
Well, I believed him because I was in a store that was owned by his daughter and son-in-law, and I knew them very well. And he is the dude. And I had friends from Santa Monica and actually from St. Martin de Tours, where I went to school. We knew the Hiltons, we knew the Red Skelton's family, the Loppers, and other people. So being around people in show business, I wasn't, "Oh my gosh, do you know who you are, Ted?" I wasn't a fanboy or overly overwhelmed. They're just people, and this is what they did for a living, and they were on TV, and some made movies, some made commercials, and they're just regular people, and that's what they did. So, and also loving film, I just said, to me, it was just a job. Well, I can work 2 days and make $400. Yeah, I'm down with that. So I did that. We filmed at Harold Lloyd's estate. I got to go to Warner Brothers and get my suit and hat to fit me, except wardrobe, and we filmed at Harold Lloyd's estate. And my driver was actually a friend of mine, Anthony Caruso. His father was Tony Caruso, who was a character actor. He was on a Star Trek episode where they went back in time. They went to a planet where people had been getting the broadcast of our gangster movies, and so the whole planet was based on that morality or those social norms. So everybody had a gang, and Tony Caruso was he had the mole on his cheek, and he was the one that said, "Yeah, Kirk, I want to get one of those fancy heaters that you got," meaning the little not transponder, but the
a taser.
The tasers, yeah,
Yeah.
right. And so I go, "Well, that's cool." And then, it's his son. It was an extra in the extras union, and he was my driver. So that was very interesting. And lunch was great. It was very professional, and we got through the day, and got a check in the mail. And I said, "Well, I could put this toward moving north." And then I get the phone call from a producer that was from Michael Douglas. And he says, "Hey, you want to come down to Culver Studios and meet Joel Douglas, Saul Zaentz, Milos Forman, Jack Nicholson, we're doing a movie called Cuckoo's Nest, and you look like you could have had skull surgery. I said, well, I did. And, well, you want to be a lobotomy patient and do One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest? And I go, with Jack Nicholson? Let me think about it for half a second. Yes. And then,
Because Jack Nicholson at the time was still a huge star.
oh, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
Easy Rider, 5 Easy Pieces.
So what was that call like? When you received the call, you got into the car, and you started driving down to the studio. I mean, what was the feeling you had?
A feeling that I had was, this is new. How far can I go with this? How far will this? Because first of all, we're all based on look, ability, and where you would fit in the story. You know, are you? Because when the Book of Faces back in the day, now it's all online. There used to be books, Leading Men, a big book with pictures and contact information for all these good-looking guys with all different looks. Same with women. And then there was another book. It was character actors and comedians. And so my face wound up in that book. But see, I wasn't even in that book when they called me to invite me to be in Cuckoo's Nest. The casting director for George Powell for Doc Savage was the casting directors. Mike Fenton and Gene Feinberg, very renowned. They were the casting directors for Cuckoo's Nest. That's how I wound up getting a phone call from Michael Douglas, one of our producers. I mean, I had never met the casting directors, and they said, I didn't even have headshots, but they had pictures from Doc Savage, and they go, what does this guy look like? Well, he's had skull surgery, his scars. Oh, we could add some on the forehead. He could be a lobotomy patient. His father was a brain surgeon, you know. Well, that might just be a good fit. He has no lines. So we'll just use them for a visual pop in and pop out at the right moment. And he's, you know, what's going to happen to Nicholson down the line. And I worked 127 days. So that changed my entire life.
And so you guys shot that where, in Oregon?
We shot it in Salem, Oregon, at Oregon State Mental Hospital, which is a real hospital. We had a wing to ourselves. The doctor in the movie, Dr. Spivey, was actually Dr. Dean Brooks, who was the head doctor in charge of that facility, yes. We spent 2 weeks in rehearsal with camera, running lines, doing blocking, things of that nature. We also had to spend an hour a day on a 6-day week with real patients to get an idea of what it was like to live there. Now, my father, being a neurologist, used to make house calls to state hospitals, state mental hospitals. He had patients that he would go see, and I would go along with him because on the way back, I'd either help drive back home or I'd like to go because he would tell me stories, and also we'd always stop at a good mom and pop diner. You know, that was part of our tradition. So I was pretty much aware of the doctor, nurse, how do you care for people with mental situations or conditions or syndromes, as they're called. So I figured, well, and I have no lines to memorize, so, you know, tell me what to do and I can do it. And they were willing to pay me $750 a week.
For Cuckoo's Nest?
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, as time went by, I mean, we all became family, Chris Lloyd, Louise, Jack, and everybody. And during the 4 months that I was there, you see all of the frailties of these people as people, not just actors and stars and famous people, or it became a big extended family. So after a while, from day to day to day to day to day, you get to see everything, almost every aspect of every person, you know, as a person, not just as an actor. And so it became intimate, and we all became very close. And my mornings would start with getting my my scars on my forehead with the one and only Fred Phillips. Now, Fred Phillips, he was like my mentor, like my Aunt Peggy was for me as a child. Fred Phillips was like my uncle Fred, and he lived in Topanga Canyon, and his father started the Makeup Artists Union. Fred Phillips also designed the ears for Spock. I mean, he's very, 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 very famous up there with the Westmores. And I remember during the first week, Christopher Lloyd and I decided to get there were some people at the bar, and they go, hey, it's a Friday night, our friends, we got a keg of Heineken, and we're doing a barbecue, and you're all welcome to come over and have dinner with us and say hi, hello. And have a few brews, and just, we'll show you around town, whatever. Just come on and relax. So we got the address, phone number, and we got in a cab, and we went. And then Ken Kenny might have been with us also. And so here we are, some local's house. Nobody knows who we are. We're not names yet. And we're just kind of hanging out. And after a while, when they realized that Jack was not going to show up, or Michael Douglas, we kind of became ignored. And these are just regular friends that would party almost every week. And they all knew each other, but we were like these total strangers. So we were like props that were ignored. And they thought maybe because we were there, that Jack would be there too, or Michael Douglas. And so we started to become ignored. And it was a Friday night, and I go to Chris Lloyd, I go, this is boring. So I went into the garage, and that's where the keg was. And then there's your keg monitors, the jocks, so to speak, that would go, hey, you want a brew, bro? Come on over. They were really down to earth. So I go, hey, we got to get back to the hotel. Maybe in the morning we'll go fishing, go to the beach or something. We got the day off, and so I no cell phones. I borrowed the guy's phone. I said, well, could you call us a cab so we can go back to the Holiday Inn? He goes, yeah, sure. And the cabbie goes, yeah, it'll be about 40 minutes before I get there. I go, okay, fine. And so we were a little miffed about it all. So I go, come on, let's screw the headache. Let's kill this keg. And the guy's hanging out in the garage. We're talking sports and we're just telling bad jokes and pounding a few Heinekens. And
these guys are partying with Pluto and Doc Brown. And they don't even know it yet.
That's right. Yeah. That's right.
Where was DeVito? Was he around?
Danny, I think Danny stayed at the hotel also, I'm pretty sure. Or he might have been at the house. I'm not quite sure. But I do remember in the one scene when we're doing the I want my cigarettes, when Sid Lassick is misbehaving and he's going beyond the scope of his character as it should be. He was trying to upstage Jack's character. He was trying to turn his character into the heroic Jack. And Milos kept giving him direction, and he wouldn't listen. He kept, what gives you that damn right? And he was going way out of character. I mean, Nurse Ratched ruled the nest. And so he was trying, his logic was, well, Jeswick has been inspired by Nicholson's character McMurphy, and now he's all jacked up, and it was improper. It was not the time. His character would never do that, and it's not written as such, and it wasn't directed as such. But he kept doing it anyway. Finally, Jack got a little pissed about it. He just said, "Oh, screw this shit," and he walked off the set like 40 minutes, about half an hour before lunch is ready.
Wow.
He's walking off the set, and we're all looking at each other, Joe Elick, and we're looking at each other with Ken Kenny and Chris. Like, well, what's going on? What's going to happen now? I don't know. Somebody's pissed. And Jack grabs the guy that was sitting with his arms crossed and his head down. That's a friend of Jack Nicholson's. And then the other guy who was tall said, I gave it all to her. That was another friend of Jack Nicholson's, personal friend that he put in the movie. They used to go skiing, and they're ski buddies. Anyway, Jack's walking off the set with Kenny, and he's almost to the hallway, and he looks over his shoulder, and he goes, Kenny, it's just another day, another 10 grand. Right, Sid? And he walks off the set, and you can hear a pin drop, and you can see my executive producer and the other producers and the director saying, come over here, Sidney. And they went down the hallway and went into the first room and closed the door, and all you could hear was yelling and screaming and cursing. And we could sue you for the day you're just burning up the dollars. You're not the character. Oh, they just chewed his ass.
The process of creating a movie is very collaborative, and if one person's not on their game, you're keeping everyone there all day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when Jack mentioned 10G, I look at Chris. I go, "Are you getting $750 a week too?" Yeah. And Jack's getting $10,000 a day. Yeah. Which was appropriate for him at that time. I mean, it cut to the chase. Cut to the chase. I've always appreciated Jack being he's a straight up guy, no bullshit. He's a human being. He'll party like he wants to, and that's his right. I've never heard anything about him that was disrespectful to anybody. He's a good friend. I think I mentioned when Jack got his haircut. I was getting my I think we mentioned that earlier.
Which one? What?
Well, there was a point toward the end of the movie when Jack gets his lobotomy, and
Oh, yeah.
yeah, that's a cute little story.
Yeah.
You baby. What are they just going to cut 3 hairs, and you're wondering if they'll grow back? Give me a break.
Yeah.
But it became family. Everybody that we worked with, when we run across each other at an audition or just on a set or at a convention, it's always, hugs and how are you and how you been, how's the family. And that became the beauty of the extended family, aside from being on the set at various locations and times, is the horror convention once After Hills, thanks to Wes. That opened up a whole new arena of commerce and also opening my hearts and minds of people to realize that this is a collective. You can have people, like I said, with serious gimps and medical conditions in a horror convention, and there's no catcalling, there's no pointing fingers, there's no, oh, what's wrong with you? There's none of that. It's total acceptance,
Right.
which felt for me as a completion of an arc of my life. I go, wow, I found my people.
Yeah. Well, growing up as a horror fan, you start to cheer for the villain of the movie. You
Yeah.
start to identify with the monster. We were talking about Frankenstein earlier, and it's one of those movies where he's chill until the other person starts freaking out. And you're like, dude, he's scared of you. And you start becoming on Frankenstein's side. And
Exactly.
and then you go to school and you're like, whoa, I'm kind of feeling the same, kind of energy here. Why am I the secluded one? Why do I feel odd or weird or off? And the horror community, you nailed it right on the head. It's exactly that. It's a judgment-free zone because we all
Judgment-free
identify.
zone.
Yeah.
Well, that's that would be a great banner to have at the entrance of a show. Mm-hmm. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. I like it.
We identify with the monsters,
Yeah.
Those are our people.
Those that are misunderstood.
Yeah.
And then I love isms. Walk a mile on your shoes before. If I point a finger at you, there's 3 more pointing back at me. What is it? What am I supposed to learn from that, if anything?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something that you said about the Cuckoo's Nest set that really stood out to me was that after you had spent a certain amount of time with the cast, you started to pick up on all of their frailties as well. But you also did spend time with some of the patients prior to shooting. So what were some of the things you picked up and learned from that experience, spending time with real patients at the hospital?
I'll be very, very frank. There was a guy named Ronald Reagan, who was our governor. Nancy Reagan used to come over to my parents' house, and she was part of the medical auxiliary that did good work for patient advocacy, etc. It's a known fact. She liked to have a few martinis. So did my mother, and they were just fine. And I think she was part of the Just Say No program, and Ronnie was the governor. Now, it was my understanding that Ronald had a degree in economics, which is good information to have, especially if you're a governor. But some of the policies as far as fiscal responsibility and also budgetary priorities was to save money for the state. And one of the areas that he looked into was anyone in a state hospital, mental hospital, that was, unless they were court ordered, and if they did not commit a felony, if they were just nuts and committed no crimes, that they were a burden on society, and to save money for the state of California, he ordered that they all be released. And he did so. They became our first homeless population. See, now my father used to go to those mental hospitals and take care of those people, and after a while, they weren't there anymore. They were out in the street being preyed upon by gangbangers and bad people and malnutrition and not getting their psych meds and not getting therapy or counseling. They were left with no safety net, and they all had miserable demises. those that didn't have family or any kind of help. So, wow, thank you so much, Ronnie. I will never forgive him for that. It was not me to forgive, but the bottom line is, I saw the damage. I saw the human damage. Every single one of those people was a child in loving arms of a mother and father at one point in time. And when you forget that, you're selling out some of your humanity for some other ulterior motive. And to save the state some money, when they can just blow money like crazy in the government and state, federal, or wherever on stupid stuff. What about those that were those that are at least able to care for themselves? I thought it was our charge to make sure and maintain the tribal structure, the societal structure, the humanity ethics structure that is so much forgotten and needs those cobwebs and need to be dusted off.
Yeah.
It's about time. And I'm sick and tired of this politically correct, woke, walk, whatever the hell you want to call it. Get a grip and get back to basics. That would be really nice.
Yeah.
And that's what the essence of Cuckoo's Nest. Especially my favorite line is when they were showing the cards, the cards for playing. Well, there's a point when Jack Nicholson's character, McMurphy, says, what, you think you're crazy? No, you're no different than the asshole down the street. He's pointing out the similarity in our human, care for one another, why we are here, what's really, really important. Not the one with the most toys and cars wins the game. No, he says, you're no different than the average asshole on the street. And at that point, I stood up in the theater and cheered.
Yeah.
Because that's the essence of McMurphy's character.
He saw the humanity behind every one of the characters in the movie as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, even though he was an
Absolutely.
asshole in the movie, he still had that bit of respect for everybody.
Well, yeah. And in the beginning, see, when the doctor tells him, we're going to keep an eye on you because I think you're faking it. And he goes, do I look like that kind of guy? Duh, come on. I have a question. Where do you think she lives? So he had the bravado and a man's man attitude. And then you have the telling it like it is, So it was like he was putting it out there, hoping it would stick to these kids because, he chastises the patients because they've been under the brutal grip of Nurse Ratched. Now Louise and I had dinner early on during production, and we shared a lot. And she told me that she was concerned about because she hadn't been in film for quite a while. She had been taking care of her family and her parents. And I remember her saying, I might win an Oscar for this, but people are going to remember me for being a bitch. And I said, well, that's not who you are. We're just playing a role. And she goes, yeah, I know. But she won an Oscar, and I was so very, very proud of her. I told her, I said, when she received her Oscar, her parents, who are mute, were sitting in the front row, and she gets her Oscar. And she was told not to do what she did, and she did it anyway. And I'm so proud of her, because here's what happened. She gets her Oscar, and she says her acceptance speech verbally and with word hand signals, sign language. Mm-hmm. And the people putting on the Oscars said, "Well, don't do the sign language to your parents because other people watching them might think about deaf people and it might make them uncomfortable." And she said, "I told them, have you ever watched the movie? If I win, I'm going to honor my parents." Just like when I mentioned in my book how Red Skelton says, "You can't tell me I can't say God bless at the end of my movie." A TV show. It's the Red Skelton Show. So I have always had a yeah, man, to people that do the right thing.
Yeah.
Don't live your life trying to compromise and please everybody because some of them do not have your intentions, good, bad, or indifferent. They could give a rat. So be your own man, be your own woman, be who you are. And if you don't know who you are, make that your life's journey.
Yeah.
And then be kind to yourself. Unless you're a total asshole, then,
But you might be a total asshole because you're not kind to yourself.
Boy, now see, there's your wisdom popping up, brother. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's very wise of you.
Thank you. I try very hard. So when you guys wrapped One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, that was one of the movies you got to watch with your father.
Yes.
Before he passed.
Yes.
And that was the movie he got to see you in. How was that?
You got to read the book.
Oh, it's okay.
It's very, very, very special.
Yeah.
Well, you read it. You don't have to share it, but did it have an emotional effect on you?
Yeah, it did. It was something that, for the audience at home, I think it's important for everybody to read this book, not only because Michael's story is so wonderful, but I think people will be able to see that even under the conditions that you were under and even the things that you faced, how forgiving you were with a lot of the people that I wouldn't have been so forgiving for, and just with how everything worked out. And I just loved how that wrapped, you being able to watch that with your dad. That was awesome.
Makes me cry every time.
Yeah, very good stuff.
But for the right reasons.
Yeah.
For the right reasons.
But you could read it in the book. So let's fast forward. So after Cuckoos is when Hills Have Eyes came about, correct?
Yes.
So when you got cast into Hills Have Eyes and started, working on the set of the movie, that was your first time doing something horror related. How did you initially react to that script?
I had a meeting in Venice Beach. They rented an office, and I met Barry Kahn, Peter Locke, our executive producers, and Wes. And they told me the story was based on the McBean family, and I was not aware of Last House on the Left, and they were all very intelligent, nice, straight-up talking guys. And what struck me right away was how quiet and calm the mind of Wes Craven was, and also how creative and brilliant he could put into juxtaposition the different elements of human nature and emotional content and how we respond to various specific situations. So he places you, the audience, in the, hopefully you're in the families on vacations mindset, because if you're approaching to see the film from the other side of the room, I don't want to be in the same room with you. But the theme, of course, in Hills Have Eyes is family values.
Yeah, isn't that hilarious?
Isn't that hilarious?
Yeah. I mean, they were a great, tight-knit family.
They both were.
They were fighting them the whole time.
I know.
Oh, they both were.
They
yeah,
both
you're totally
were.
right.
No, they both were.
I mean, you were doing the right thing in the movie.
Yeah. As Ruby says, "You got nothing to eat." Well, I'm sorry, Ruby, I can't help you. I gave you the last of everything, and blah, 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 blah. Yeah. And then the family arrives, and, oh, gosh, I took a tire iron and I split his face wide open. Well, how bad was it?
This is amazing. I'm like a little kid in a candy shop right now. This is great.
When I told Wes that, I said, wait, you can't, that's not going to work. He goes, really? Yeah, I mean, come on, it makes me laugh. How bad was it? I took a tire iron and split his face. What do you mean, how bad was it? He goes, yeah, but Michael, what happens right after that? Well, never mind.
Yeah.
Never mind.
You were quite in shape in that movie.
Yes, I was. Now, I was in very good shape. Now, the reason I wore the leather around my shoulders is because it had a look, but it also was to hide the abdominal-sized bandages under both of my armpits, where that was after my I think that was after my second major operation under both arms, where they just opened them up about 6-7 inches from, and took a tire, and they took a sand wedge and removed all the tissue, like the sweat glands, sebaceous glands, hair follicles, all that stuff was malformed because of my birth defects and premature birth. And so they just removed as much of that as they could. And then as the tissue grew back together, I would get abscesses deep down inside. Sometimes they'd be this really tiny, size of a pea, and then go away. And other times they'd be the size of your thumb. And when you're getting carved on over and over and over again for 4 years in scar tissue, I mentioned that in the book, and there are times when "ow" was the word of the day. I used to eat number 3 coatings like candy because the pain was so intense. You take them when you really, really need them, and they work better.
Yeah.
I'm not into being addicted to anything. Not my thing. So I was in good shape. I was lean. The best beefcake shot. I'm just taking that aside. If you watch Ruggero Deodato's movie I was in called Cut and Run, that was years later. I was close to 200 pounds and in my late 30s, and yeah, in really good shape. I'm in really good shape now, considering my age. I'm 74 years old, but I'd be ripped.
Yeah.
As our friend Lou Ferrigno would say, it's a lifestyle. And I know what that means. I've had wonderful trainers. I don't believe in, getting all roided out and being whoa, you're a little too big. It's scary. But you be healthy. I don't recommend smoking, vaping, or chewing because it's very cancerous. But I smoke some weed once in a while. It's very common. It's better than a lot of pharmaceuticals. I mean, just people, just be honest with yourself. Things in moderation. Whatever it is in moderation is a good thing, and it's good to be kind to yourself. It's okay to forgive yourself, not for stuff you'd never address. Sometimes we all have a list of things I could do better here, and I should have. Like in AA, they talk about you have to. I forget the exact term. I've had a lot of friends that have gone through the program. You have to basically forgive everybody that you've had situations with, and that's a good thing to do. Not that you would wish for that to happen again, because it's do whatever you want. It doesn't mean be a doormat. What it means is stop taking that circle of energy that just cycles and doesn't move you forward. Don't forget, forgive. Don't forget. Well, let it go, forgive, but don't forget the pitfall of being in that situation again, and learn to avoid those types of people.
Right.
That's what I try to tell youth when I work with school programs and stuff, and talk to kids as far as mentoring to a certain degree. Because it must be really, really challenging. I talk to a lot of youth at conventions these days, and I've been doing it for 40 years. So it's interesting for me to see how youth, I would say, 12-year-olds, 19, 20, and then people in 30. I'd say people from 15 to 35. Every generation of people in those age brackets are pretty much negotiating through the same trials and tribulations that we've all gone through, if we're beyond that age. And I find it very interesting when I bring that up in conversations with them, and they're kind enough to share with me what it's like for their generation with it, and how they work within the qualities of how it affects them and how they deal with it, and where do they compartmentalize and put certain things on shelves. Yeah, you see it on the shelf, but you don't have to be emotionally involved in it on a daily basis, because it's just going to take up all your time, and time is very precious.
Right. Yeah. So you like doing the conventions?
I love doing the conventions.
That's funny.
I can get comic books at a discount.
Like, oh shit, it's Michael Berryman. Yeah, it's interesting. I always go to the conventions and I walk around and I see all the stars that are sitting down at the tables. I've always wondered how much fun they're truly having.
I'll be honest. Saturdays sometimes on a big show can be it's work. It's a lot of energy. It's a lot of energy exchange between the people. Now, some people like Freddy Krueger, my buddy, and my friend from Boondock Saints.
Norman Reedus?
Norman's great. Last time I saw Norman, they always have a long line, and you know what? And they really don't have time to chit chat, but they do the the best they can because they're there for hours at a time, and they do have really long lines. I've had long lines too, but these people, Robert and the others, they're working their butts off. And so I'd pop in once in a while. I'd see Norm. Last time I saw Norm, and I go, he took a second. He says, "Give me a second." We spent about 30 seconds together. And I go, give him a hug. And I go, "How you doing, bro?" And he goes, I'm doing good. I'm hanging in there. It's a Saturday. And I go, yeah. I go, so are you okay with not being allowed to have a haircut? Which is an inside joke because if you get a wonderful series like that, that's winning the gold ring. And you have to look the character unless the character gets a haircut in the series, you see. And so what that meant was, are you happy with that steady paycheck? Yeah. And of course, the answer is yes. And he's a wonderful fellow, and and we all appreciate it when that happens. It's very rare. But when it happens to one of our brothers and sisters in the industry, we're very happy for them because it means that they can take care of the responsibilities to their family. That's the most important aspect of what we do as far as how it affects our day-to-day life. It's not how big a house you have. Like my friend Paul Newman, General Schwarzkopf, and Arnold Palmer, I've only met Paul, but he invited me to the Bogey Creek camp in Florida and subsequently to another camp, and kept in touch with him and other people that do charity work and raise money. And like Paul's products, I would say 90% of it goes for a good cause. It's not some fake organization where they're buying another house on an island somewhere. No, this is the real deal. And at the end of the camp, when you leave on Sunday, there's a little poem that the family members and the patients and the celebrities and the doctors and caretakers, we all read together. We hold a candle in the parking lot before everybody goes home. And it says this: "At the end of my life, it will not matter how much money I made or how big my house was or what kind of a car I drove, but what will matter is if I made a difference in the life and lives of children." Bingo. Yeah. There you go. People go, "Oh, isn't it great to be rich celebrity?" "I'm not rich celebrity." "Yeah. What would you like to happen?" I'd like to hit a killer show before I die and make a bunch of money and set my family up for life and set up some charities that are self-funding and can do good work. Yeah. Because I don't have superpowers, but if I did, I'd be very, 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 very busy. You wouldn't see me. I'd be in all the places that the billionaires and trillionaires, I would come pay you a visit. We would have a talk. Yeah. But since that's not going to happen, you know what? You do what you can.
Do what you can. So before we wrap, I mean, let's get into what we've got going on now. I mean, outside of acting, outside of the conventions, I mean, what are you into?
Well, I'm 74 years old. I'm in good health. My family, we live in the country, in a forest. It's lovely. I, a year ago, was diagnosed with Parkinson's. I take my anti-shaky meds. They've been working pretty well. Eventually, it'll be more challenging. I'm basically healthy. I take care of myself. We try to eat right and laugh. I like to go to a movie matinee once in a while, have a nice dinner. But I want to do my subsequent book. The weather's getting a little better for golf in Michigan, where we live, and I love the game. And I've been studying how to, if you're into golf, on the downswing, how to lay off the club. It's a term to where you get the proper approach into making that nice solid. Oh yeah, and I have had a hole-in-one, so I could die tomorrow, and I would still be sad, but at least I say, "Yeah, boss, what do you think? Yeah, you see that hole-in-one I made? Yeah, it was great." So what's going on is, for me, it's to be honest with those that I share my life with, to be supportive to the best I can, and pray to be better tomorrow, and try not to let the news and the things that I know I have no control over not be such a burden on my friends and loved ones and myself, and to be a good neighbor in my zip code. I shop local. I pay cash. I let people know. Yeah, I don't say I don't mind paying more in your store. What I just say is, I prefer to shop here for the obvious reasons. It would be a sad day when your sign is closed because a box store underbid you and put you out of business. I'm not a big fan of the corporate globalism. Like I said in the past, I have met them. There are good ones. Most of them are pretty selfish. I look forward to the day when I hope before I die that there can be an understanding that this whole my God's better than your God, there's a line in the dirt. These concepts are antiquated. We can share the resources of this wonderful planet, and there's room enough for everybody. Let's just chill out and take care of one another. And those that misbehave and cause harm, we need to approach that in a compassionate yet intelligent and safe manner to protect those that cannot. That's pretty much my entire philosophy of life. And also, make sure that you go out into nature, go into the ocean, catch a wave, go out in the boat on a lake, take a walk in the forest, spend 2 or 3 nights. It takes about 2 or 3 nights alone in nature to where the city's gone. You wake up, you're sleeping on pine needles with a couple blankets or an air mattress underneath you. You hear a noise. Oh, it could be a bear. It's going to eat me. No, it might be a woodchuck. It might be a squirrel. Oh, the wild outside is not so wild. It's become acquainted with with where you live. Even when I lived in the city, I would walk through alleys. Why? It's like going back in time. I would walk down the alleys in Santa Monica, and you hardly see anybody. That's where they, take their car, put it in the garage, come back out through the alley, and go somewhere else in the city. It's where they put their trash. It's where the squirrels and the birds and maybe a coyote or whatever. It's like a time capsule. Take the time to slow down and enjoy each moment. And I'd like to leave it with this. I take that positive, capsulized perspective of this life and the blessings that are available to us and these gifts. And if the gifts are not appreciated, they will get rusty and tarnished and stop working. We need to teach our youth, like the song by Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Teach your children well, as time will tell. Da, 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 da. Our House, that's a great album. Deja Vu, it's a great album. So I take my philosophy, my spirituality, and my awareness, and another room, which is I'm willing to accept thoughts that either I have not thought of, or maybe these thoughts will help that I'm allowing in this room to help clarify and help me maybe readjust some of my thoughts, because maybe some of my thoughts and beliefs could benefit from a readjustment. It's not judging myself. It's like everybody has something to offer. So bring that in. Incorporate it if it works for you for the better good. And then I take that and I put it into my heart. And I say, this is like a mantra, like a prayer, whatever word you want to use for an adjective. And I go, okay, this is why I am alive. This is why I'm on this planet. This is why I look forward to another day. And I want this positive for everybody. And be kind to yourself. And then I take my finger and I put it up to my ear to where I can hear my heartbeat. And I close my eyes and I listen until I get that clear realization that is a heart. It's pumping. It's allowing all of this to happen. And I go, then every time that heart beats, it's a signal. Can't stop the signal, Mel. That's from a movie. Okay, what does this mean? That's my mantra. I don't have time to sit and pray every day, so I ask my heart to do it for me. And every heartbeat, it's saying, I have gratitude. Gratitude. I leave you with that.
What profound wisdom.
It's all good.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. Ladies and gentlemen, please, please, please go get Michael Berryman's book. It's all good. It's a very wonderful, wonderful book. Michael is going to be coming out with an audio book here fairly soon. Andy's working on a sequel. Michael, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming in today to the crypt. I really
It's
appreciate
been
it.
an absolute pleasure and an honor, sir.
Thank you, my friend.
And support his podcast.
Thank you.
This guy's pretty profound.
Thanks, guys. All right. And the signature piece.
Peace out.
That was incredible. Thank you, sir.
watch it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, you got some editing, but man, that was the best interview I think I've ever done.
Upstairs